Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Vibe Coding Club, where we bring light on how to build with AI. My name is Pedro. With me is Danielle, and we are both from the founding team of Commutal, an AI startup based in Lisbon. That I'll get back to you at the end of this conversation. And with no further ado, I would like to present you Mr. Dick Hardt, a true pioneer of the internet age and identity space, from founding ActiveState in the early days of open source to leading the Identity 2.0 movement with OpenID and OAuth, and founding Skip. Dick has always been at the forefront of how we connect and trust online, and after influential roles in Microsoft and Amazon, he is now in Lisbon building Hello, a new take on user identity. I think I got that right, Dick?
Well, you did a great job. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, I'll have to record that and feed it into the machine for my future positioning.
Oh, thank you. Well, actually, I have like the first question. I think we can shoot it, which is it's actually correlated to this quote that has been popping at the back of my head, which is. History never repeats itself, but it often rhymes. And I mean, you've built companies through several tech cycles. How do you think that AI is going to change the equation for startup founders today?
So I'm probably older than almost everybody here. So saw the PC revolution, saw Windows roll out, saw the internet come out, open source come out, mobile come out, right? All of those were fairly substantial changes. AI's been around a long time. I had a venture where we did AI in the late 80s. That was kind of a cool thing to figure out the wood species of cut lumber. But the functionality now with the LLMs is mind-blowing, right? It's a seismic shift bigger than anything else that I've seen. It's already changing how people are getting hired. If you've seen some of the reports, like, the number of junior people going into creative roles is dropping because people are using AI agents for that. Just in the last 4 months, just for my own venture, I'm thinking, well, I was planning on having, a team, 6, 8 people, and I'm thinking I'll get 1 or 2 smart people that understand how to architect. And we get further on, I'll show you guys stuff where I've built like full packages that would have been, a month of work in a couple days.
It's amazing. Yeah, always a pleasure to talk with you. We spoke earlier as well. I was wondering, since you are talking about Identity 2.0, and I also saw the presentation that you had about user-centric identity, maybe you could explain a bit for the rest of the people what it is, how it functions, so people also get to know a bit better of the job that you have developed.
Sure. So I'm sure when we say the word identity, everybody has an idea about what that means. But I bet you if we did a poll around here, we wouldn't get the same definition from anybody, right? It's a word that everybody thinks they know what they mean because they have a good idea of it. And having been in the industry, often in conversations where there's disagreements about what to do, it's because one person's talking about a front leg and the other one person's talking about the back leg, and they don't really see the whole elephant out there. When I think of identity, I'm thinking about how did we enable society to scale? And how we enabled society to scale was that, there was a tribe, and then there was another tribe, and everybody that wasn't in your tribe that you didn't know was bad. But then eventually we realized, okay, if I can trust the leader of my tribe to decide if that tribe is safe, good, or bad. And so then I would be able to trust somebody I'd never interacted with before because I'm trusting somebody else. And so if you sort of roll forward on a lot of other aspects of identity, right? Like, are you a knight? Are you a citizen of a state? Or are you somebody that can practice medicine or be a lawyer or practice as an engineer, right? There's some authority that makes a statement about you, and we trust that authority, and that's how we enable scale, right? So when we go to the doctor, they've got their little badges up there, and we're assuming that someone else has figured out whether they're competent enough to be a doctor, right? We didn't have to go and test them ourselves to figure out, do they know how to be a doctor, right? And so that, to me, is sort of the core thing about what is identity, right? And so there's aspects about, your date of birth, your residence, your citizenship, all those you get certain rights about, and whether you're able to do things. And so at a high level, that's what I think of as being the core identity things I'm working on, is how do we take statements from entities that are authorities and trusted, and how do I share that with some other entity so they know whether they can interact and how they'll interact with me. So that could be my organization saying whether I'm an employee and whether I'm in the admin group or the finance group, right? Whether they say those things about me determines what I'm allowed to do in which apps. It's really the same type of problem. And in enterprise, right, they sort of have some bits around that. So the Fortune 5000 have figured out how to go and connect all their apps with their directory, so when they make a change in one place, it flows out through everything. But that's not readily available for most small, medium businesses or in smaller apps. And that's part of your work life. And so part of what we're trying to do on Hello is how do we solve that? And that is sort of the first part of one of the big parts of your digital life is proving what you're able to do to other apps. But then there's also, for everybody, I'm assuming here, that you live in Portugal or you live in Lisbon or you're over 21, right? That's very difficult to prove online in a frictionless way, and so we often have identity cards in our wallet that make it very easy for us to prove things. And in this space, we call that reusable identity, right? You went through some heavy process and now you have this lightweight thing that enables you to easily prove something about yourself, but we don't have a digital equivalent for that. And so our approach at Hello is different. It's contrarian to how many people think it. How many people are familiar with the EU wallet initiative? One? Okay. Well, they have some marketing to do.
We use chave model digital.
Yeah. Well, there's an initiative that the EU says every country has to go and use, right? And the fact that hardly anybody here knows about it is somewhat telling. But it's in what's called the issuer holder verifier model. So there's some authority that issues a credential, you put it in your digital wallet, and then when you go somewhere, you can present it and somebody can verify it. That tech's been around for 15 years, and I looked at the space and I thought, that hasn't been widely adopted yet. And having been involved in a number of protocols that have been rapidly adopted, I'd say it's an architectural problem, not an adoption problem, and that when you have the right bits, things get rapidly adopted. And so our approach at Hello is like, well, rather than trying to get everybody to adopt new technology, why don't we just work with what everybody already has, right? And so, in time, we'll enable you to, what's it called here in Portugal?
Chave model digital.
Yeah, that, okay. I'm not going to be able to say that word for a while yet.
CMD.
Okay.
It uses OAuth, I think, for you.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No. I know enough about it to know it's a VC format, yeah. But we'll integrate with that, and we'll integrate with each other country's things so people can use what they have as opposed to, having to adopt something else. And so our model is an interchange model where we sit between all the different sources of identity and the app. And our first push is really to help solve enterprise identity, for, you're an organization and you want to have sign into your SaaS app, so we make it easy for the SaaS app that they just connect to us, and then we connect to each enterprise. and then it's really easy for all the people in all those companies to be able to log into that app, and when you deprovision somebody in the app, then it'll deprovision them over here. How many people use GitHub? Have a GitHub account? Anybody not? Who doesn't have a GitHub account? Really? You don't have a GitHub account? No. No, okay. Okay, okay. Well, I was wondering that you were anti-GitHub and had a GitLab account. And so we're going to provide a free tool that enables, so one of the challenges in GitHub is when you can easily add, you go and you add somebody to the org, that's your org for your company, right, where you have private repos. But when you let somebody go, somebody has to remember to go back to GitHub and take them out of the org. And because until you take them out of the org, they still have access to all of the, all of your IP at that point. Because there's not, and setting it up to integrate is super hard. And part of it's because in the GitHub model, people use their own credentials to access GitHub as opposed to log in with their corporate account. So we're going to make a thing to deprovision that we'll make available, that I'd love to try to get people here to beta test it at some point.
Yeah,
Anyways, yeah, okay. That was a long answer to your question.
That's perfect.
Yeah, but our mission is how do we give users control of their identity? And so today, doesn't happen as much in Europe, but it happens heavily in the US, where most of the data that organizations learn about you come from some other source. And so you give it some, your name and your address and some identifier, and then they query and go and get a bunch of info about you, but you never see that. And so we want to change that. We want to give users control over what's being released, that they see what it is and can decide whether they want to share it. And so with an interchange model, the app wants something about you, they send you over, we work with you to go and figure out where to get that. You see what it is, and you decide whether you want to share it with them or not.
You mentioned that in the EU, there's less of that, more on the US. For example, this type of projects
yeah,
are not impacted
yeah.
in the same way.
The US has, US privacy laws say what you can do with somebody's identity as opposed to what you can't do. They're not very privacy oriented. And so there's a very large number of companies that sell data about people in the US.
I think back in the days we also were a bit more open on that, but since the GRPD, I think it's the name.
GDPR.
Exactly,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Things become a bit
Yeah.
not as open and more, now everything is more controlled. EU is basically regulating everything.
It's better, yeah. Yeah, but still you can give people permission to go and get data about you. And then you don't really know what it is. Yeah.
It's actually interesting that I was looking at your, basically your career path, and you've been touching in this identity space for a long time. And I think it could be interesting to try to understand what inspired you to get in this space, like something that happens, I don't know, like for around, I think it was on 2006, you also gave a presentation.
Yeah.
It was actually funny, it was a dick on my side.
Yeah, I have as much fun with my name as I can, So for anybody that's wondering, my name really is Dick. I am a real Dick. I'm not a Richard. So.
Dick Hardt.
Well, there's lots of funny jokes about that too. Yeah. When I started at Microsoft, the recruiter wanted to know, like, what did I want my alias to be? And I says, well, can I just have Dick? And he's like, nope, that's not there. And I said, okay, well, how about Dick Hardt then? And he said, okay. And so it goes through the whole system, right? And it goes through and it pops out the other end. And unbeknownst to me and the recruiter, there's an 8-character limit on how long a username can be at Microsoft. Yeah. For some piece of software won't let it be more than 8 characters. And so for a little while, my alias at Microsoft was Dick Hardt. Yeah.
Without the T.
without the T. Yeah,
Can only make it worse.
yeah. So, but at Amazon, I had Dick at Amazon.com. So,
Interesting. But what brought you to
but
this identity space?
I mean, so a fair amount of my career was always sort of scratching my own itch for something, and so I was at a consulting company, and we were shipping CDs to Adobe and Microsoft on file conversion tools. That's what we did. And then we thought, hey, there's this internet thing, and so we could just mail people the stuff electronically instead of shipping a CD. And so I hooked up the mail server in '92 for that company, and then I thought, oh, this internet thing could be big. And so then I created another one of my new ventures, and then I saw a bunch of people were wanting to build websites, so I started to build websites for people, but everyone was using Perl to build websites, but I'd always been programming in Windows, and Perl didn't run on Windows, and I happened to sit beside a Microsoft guy flying back from one of the first W3C conferences, and bitched at him that Perl 5 wasn't on Windows. And he says, well, why don't you do that? And I sort of wrote up a proposal, and then Microsoft paid me to port Perl 5 to Windows. And after a while, I thought in '97, anybody could build a website. And so I pursued a business around Perl, which became Active State. And we had a marketing relationship with O'Reilly and Associates, and so I thought, hey, we have 1 million users a month moving through our site. They have a similar amount of people moving through their site. If someone's provided an email and signed up at one site, wouldn't it be great if at the other site they could just click a button and give the other site the email, right? And that got me into looking at identity. And when I sold Active State, then I looked at identity stuff. And then the more I learned about identity, the more I saw that this was a massive, huge problem, and I've been working in that ever since, and been trying to figure out how do I drive and make changes, whether that's in a small company or in a large company like Microsoft or Amazon.
Perfect. I know I asked you this question earlier, but I think maybe people also like to know your answer on that. Since we are seeing a new wave for crypto projects like Web3 and even AI agents taking the role as a user, like trying to log in into stuff, do you see a shift towards like a new identity, like in this case 3.0, or everything will still be the same, like still same paradigm?
There's a bunch of new ventures that have been founded on people pitching that we need to have a different identity infrastructure. We need brand new things for all of it. How many people here are familiar with MCP? And so, the current model in MCP for authorization is to use OAuth as a flow. And some of the choices they were making, I think those are going to be a problem. But then once they had it all finished, I wrote my own MCP server and realized, that was all, there's a number of bad choices in here, and wrote a post on LinkedIn saying that we shouldn't be using OAuth for this layer. But there's a whole bunch of people that are looking to go and invent and create brand new things, because that's fun and exciting, shiny new toys, but I don't think we need to invent many new things for what we're doing. There's a fair amount of technology already sitting around that has proven itself in a number of areas that we reuse, but if you got a new venture, that doesn't make you money, and if you want to carve a name for yourself in a new space, that doesn't do that. So there's a bunch of forces against that. But currently, agents making calls are, just like any other kind of service role in an organization. You create that it's not acting on behalf of a person, it's some service. There's a spec coming up, a new working group in ITF for bot auth, which is currently now when any of the crawling bots crawl, they kind of just give it, like it's super loose on identity for that. And now with many of the LLMs and agents crawling, people are wanting to know who it is that's crawling. And IP addresses is a bad way of doing that. And so they're looking to adopt HTTP message signing to say which bot it is making a call. But that's not brand new technology. And that will probably flow out and solve a number of similar problems, but it's not necessarily a brand new thing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And well, I was going to do some.
Those are all probably much longer answers than you were hoping for.
Yeah, very technical, I would say. Good, very technical. But yeah, I was going to do some more questions regarding like your choice to move to Portugal, and how do you feel about the ecosystem here, and how do you see it in the future?
I guess the first part of that is, why am I here?
Yeah.
So my wife and I and our dog, he doesn't get much of a vote in anything. But we were living in Seattle, and COVID had come through. Seattle's one of the first places that COVID hit, and a bunch of the BLM riots were there. So there's still parts of downtown Seattle that are boarded up. And we just didn't feel we were paying a lot of money to be in a city without getting all the benefits of a city. We'd previously lived in Vancouver, which we consider a real city. We lived in San Francisco, which we viewed as a collection of neighborhoods, which is similar to our view of Seattle. And so we decided we wanted to move somewhere else. And we had some friends that had moved here, and so we knew some people. And then the more I dug into it, I saw, there's the unicorn factory really was one of the things I came across, and I looked it up, and it's like, it looks like there's a pretty good ecosystem. And then suddenly it clicked for me that the website was in English and not in Portuguese, and so I dug into that and realized that, professionally you can work in English here, right? And say compared to Spain or France, which, they get a little cranky if you don't speak their language. And, so we had some friends here. We just looked at it. Seemed like lots of great things. Looked like a good ecosystem. And we decided, we're going to go. We'd never been to Portugal. We says, we're going to go put our house on the market. We're going to go there for 6 months. What would we learn in a week or two? You don't really know what it's going to be like. And so we came here. We lived in a number of different areas. Decided we really liked it. Went back. Completed selling our home, and now we've got a property under contract that completes in a year.
If you were like a god, how would you bloom the ecosystem here in Portugal? What do you think are the initiatives that can really make it grow?
I don't have nothing comes to mind. I mean, there's a number of things where there's efforts going on, and so it would be probably executing on those better. We applied to get a seal in the CIFID program, because it's like, well, why not? We'll find out in a little while whether we got the seal, but I'm a little distressed because they says, we might give you a condition or a provisional seal. It's like, well, what's a provisional seal get me? It's like, well, then we check back with you in 9 months to see what progress you've had. And I says, what, you're going to see whether I've had a baby after 9 months or something? Like, why 9 months?
Bureaucratic process.
And what's going to happen there, right? So there's some aspect, there's some bureaucracy which is challenging.
But do you think that's like Portuguese or whole of Europe? I mean, maybe.
So you might be surprised to hear this, but the bureaucracy and overhead of running a company in the U.S., having run companies in the U.S. and run companies in Canada, U.S. is significantly higher than Canada. Okay. Right? There's an awful lot of things, particularly as you get to scale in a company of 100 people, that a whole bunch of brand new laws come in place about things you have to go and do. And so there's a fair amount of regulatory capture in the US that make it hard for new entrants to come in. But our experience has been, the people have been generous and kind, right? It feels very safe here. So we really like living here. How do you make a place be better at, attracting talent and stuff? Everyone's trying to do that.
Yeah.
And so
How do we get more competitive?
how do you differentiate yourself, right?
Yeah.
So a number of people say, oh, well, we're going to do all these different things. Like, well, then you're not good at any of them,
Yeah.
right? If you want to be in finance, you're in, New
London
York
or
or
New York,
London, or it used to be Hong Kong, now it's Singapore. If you're going to be in film in the US, you're going to be in Hollywood, LA. So what makes, what's going to be unique here? But then you're placing a bet as to what you're really good at. So probably the big thing would be to go and, a challenge is how do you have, there's just this whole political challenge, right? Because really a lot of these things are driven by, government politicians. And so they're doing things to get them elected. And so if the population doesn't really think that that's important, then that won't be the priority for them. And so how do you drive that? I don't know. I haven't been here long enough. I got very active politically when I was in Canada and helped drive changes in the province of BC. And so I have seen how things can happen, but I don't know enough about here to have any hard opinions.
I hope you'll stay longer, then you'll figure out something. Or maybe that is perfect. The last question before the demo that you have would be, what advice would you give to 25-year-old new founders in Portugal trying to build a competitive AI system?
Trying to build a competitive AI system?
Anything else, yeah, anything else.
Well, I wanted to sort of ask some questions of the group just to get a sense of who's here and what people are trying to do. Because if you've read anything about what I say online, I have no shortage of opinions and hot takes on things. So who hasn't written like code themselves before the AI world? Everyone's like written some code. You've never written code?
No, technical.
Okay.
30 years ago.
What's that?
30 years ago. When I was at high school.
That having coded gives you some framework for what's going on, right? One thing I worry about in the vibe coding is a number of people think, oh, I don't need to be technical to get my startup going because now I can use vibe coding to build the software. And a shift I see is that many people that might be customers of you, that you think would be customers of something you vibe coded, can just vibe code their own solution themselves. And it will be a better fit for what they want because they've designed it to do what they want to do instead of you trying to build something general purpose. And so, something that might seem like, oh, here's something that would solve this problem, and it's, your skill sets enable you to go and build that, because you have some expertise in that. But I think in a few years, most people that have a specific need for something will just vibe code it themselves, right? So, I read a story yesterday of a doctor that had vibe coded stuff for his office, right? He's not a coder, but, he started to subscribe to less and less SaaS products because he was able to build, a solution that did what he wanted to do, the way he wanted to have it done. And so my advice to somebody 25 is, I don't think that's a path for success, right? That you could vibe code, you know, a fairly simple app. And if you, and as soon as it gets complicated, then you need to understand technical architectures because the machines aren't good at that. And so
do you think that, for example, vibe coding could be beneficial to start like a proof of concept? And then once you see, okay, maybe this is something that I want to build and people are also interested in it, like trying to gather technical people and build it like from scratch instead of just vibe coding all the way?
So yes, it's great for proofs of concept, but it's great for proofs of concept for you and your startup and for someone that would potentially be a customer that does it themselves, and then they have something that works, and then they don't need to buy it from you, right? Like I think that, you know, sort of a lower end chunk of the market is going to change significantly with vibe coding, because a whole bunch of people now aren't gated by trying to go and get some engineer to do it or find some SaaS app to do it, right? They can just do it themselves, and maybe they share it as open source for other people to use or not, right? Like that, it's like building a mobile app isn't really make any money like it did 15 years ago.
I do a lot of Frankensteins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to learn and test and do some things, and you know, like for sure, as a proof of concept mechanism, but you know, I mean, it all depends on what you're trying to build, right? But it needs to be something technically significant that somebody else can't vibe code and get partly there.
For go-to-market thing, would you do it? Like go-to-market helpers, like scraping some emails and sending some basic stuff.
Something custom to yourself.
Sorry.
Basically, I think the idea is that something custom to you is worth vibe coding.
Yeah.
Instead
Oh,
of
for sure.
building
Yeah.
a product
Vibe coding your own GTM, right? That's a huge movement, right? Like, how do we automate our whole go-to-market motion, right? There's GTM engineers, right, that are heavily using vibe coding to go and dramatically improve the productivity of their sales and marketing teams, right? Because you're not sort of gated by how do I plug together a bunch of things by different vendors, right? It's like, well, this isn't working. Let's build something that does it, right?
Yeah.
And then you've done it, right?
Yeah, because I get bullied a lot because I'm the only non-technical person in Commutal, and I'm surrounded by engineers. And when I say, "Oh, have you tried this vibe coding thing?" They say, "Oh my God, don't try that. Don't commit those codes. It's horrible." But how would you like use it in a way that it can, you can actually profit from it and don't put a startup in danger?
You ask me that a different way.
Using it like for go-to-market and not putting.
Well, that's using it yourself, building your own tools, right? And so because of that, right, you know, as a software company, you know, as a technically oriented company, but it's not just you, it's like anybody's go-to-market can be accelerated by building their own tools, right? Like, you know, I think there's going to be a big shift of people building and, you know, updating what they use as their own apps, you know, that's going to dramatically, you know, that a lot of people used to be gated. It's like, okay, I got to get some time from Joe over there to go and build this thing for me. Well, Joe, that's kind of a junior engineer that would build the little web pages that were all the custom apps in the company, is going to be out of a job unless he has a new skill set, because all the other people in the company can now just vibe code the thing. They don't have to go to Joe anymore.
Okay, so maybe it would be beneficial to understand, okay, maybe vibe coding is not the perfect thing for you to create a product around it.
Oh, I didn't say
do
that.
vibe
I qualified my statement by what knowledge you had, right?
Okay, I'm just saying that, for example, someone that is totally non-technical,
Yeah.
doesn't know anything about code,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be the best approach. Is that your take?
Vibe coding is really great for you to improve your own productivity, right? You thinking that you're going to be able to vibe code something you sell to somebody else, I don't think is a path, because those other people can just vibe code the same thing themselves, right? But for you to be able to go and be able to do far more than you were able to do before, definitely. Right, so as a personal or organization productivity tool around how do you improve the productivity of your own org, definitely, right? For non-technical people that are domain experts in what they want to get done, right? Because you know what you want to get done, and so if it's a fairly simple thing, the tools can go and you can flail around enough to go and be able to go and do it.
Since it's in your own domain, you can also have like a saying in it. You won't just
It's doing what you want to do, right? You're not having to build a general purpose surface that works for 20 different companies, right? You got to build something that works well for your company, right? I mean, still today, most software is custom in-house software. I don't know what the latest stats are, but I think it's actually going to become even more custom in-house software with vibe coding. 20 years ago, it was like 65, 70% of all software was still in-house software, not commercial software. Now, for people that have deep technical expertise, vibe coding is a superpower, right? So all I've been doing is vibe coding the last 2 months. I haven't written code in the editor for 2 months. And I've churned out a whole bunch, I've churned out a number of simple projects, and then I've bitten off some big projects, and it's like, oh, that thing just got confused, and so I've been having to figure out how do I use the tools at a higher scale that I'm happy to share with people sort of what I've been doing and hear any questions people have and any thoughts people have about what they're doing.
So if you have some advice for people that are non-technical, that are starting to get into this vibe coding space, the main advice would be learn a bit about it and then start vibe coding?
Use vibe coding to build software for you to be much more productive in some venture, right? But it's not going to be a path to build a software company, right?
Makes sense. So how
Like
are you
say you've got a new idea for how to run a chiropractic office, right? And you want to sort of drive efficiency in your chiropractic office, right? Well, you know what you want. You can vibe code a whole bunch of stuff. You're not having to, buy other software, right? Like there's many, many entrepreneurial things, and so now you can build the software that you use to go and give you an advantage over other people because you can vibe code it.
That makes sense.
Maybe it's an opportunity for software houses to ship some small software to clients, to users, like to dentists and etc.
Yeah, but I think that some of those dentists will go and just build what they want, right? And the value is probably in you building some underlying architecture that they can then customize. But the value you're bringing then is like a robust architecture down below, which, if you don't know how to do, computer system architecture, you're not going to be able to do, right?
Building the foundations so they...
Right. You're going to build something that you're going to have insights as to how do you make it easy for other people to build all this other custom stuff on top.
Interesting.
Does somebody have any questions regarding conversation?
Yeah?
I have a few, but very curious on your comments. I think they were really, really solid. Maybe first, one question about your own process, because in the end, you also said over the last 2 months, you haven't written a single line of code, and it gives you superpowers, right? So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your own process on
Sure. So I've got about 6, 8 projects sitting on my machine that I can show you. Some of them are public repos, some of them are private repos. None of it's super sensitive. I don't think we have anything super sensitive. And so I'll pull that up, and then you can ask for more details about what I'm doing there. Sure. Yeah. To give some background, because I don't have any of this up, is, you know, Is time up? That's it? That's it? You know, so when the first gen of LLMs came out with, you know, VS Code, you know, and GitHub Copilot, right? Those were a 2-3x productivity boost because you essentially had super autocomplete. You would do something. It's like, yeah, that function's good, right? But I'm still coding, right? Yeah. And then I started to use that or ChatGPT to do kind of similar in some ways to what I'm saying other people would do vibe coding, which is I would write little scripts and utilities to do a job rather than like manually doing it, right? And so our database is in DynamoDB, and so I would do a dump of the entire database into JSON, which is not really JSON, but it's kind of JSON-like. And then I would go and give samples of the records to ChatGPT, and I would say, write me a script that will go and pull this data out. And it would go and give me some shell script that I would just paste in and run, like nothing destructive is going to happen because it's read-only right there. And then I would get some answers. And then I would go and like, okay, now I want something different. I would go and tell it what I want to do. So I was essentially doing, you know, data analysis without a data analysis tool, right? And, you know, asking questions that would have been, like, I would not have wanted to have spent 4 hours writing a shell script to do that. And so I would write lots of things like that, and I would write, you know, I'd tell it to write shell scripts for me to do deployments and CI and tests and things like that. So that's the pattern that I had up till about 3 or 4 months ago, is I would have it write simple things that, you know, weren't sensitive to the code, and I would just use code, you know, autocomplete, super autocomplete for things, particularly around tests, because I hate writing tests. And I found out, man, this thing's great at tests, and I tell it, no, that test needs to be like that, and then the next 3 tests were like, okay, that's like, you know, I can't type that fast. Nowhere near that fast, right? And that was a huge plus, because then if I had more tests, then I found the bugs through tests instead of like running through the debugger, so my amount of time in the debugger dropped as tests found more things beforehand. But with that, I can go and share what I do now.
Please do.
Which, you know, given the pace, you know, in 6 months I might come here and say, oh, that was so dated. So I don't know if anyone's looked at this. I just had this as a start. If you've not like looked at like the prompting guides from Claude and stuff like that, look at them, right? They're saying, here's how to use me. Don't give me a simple little prompt. Give me context. So this is a MCP server I wrote in 2 or 3 days for Hello. And so in Hello, are people familiar with data plane, control plane? Let's say no. Okay. Data plane, these are terms we heavily used in Amazon and other places for. Data plane is all the APIs for the stuff that people are using. And the control plane is how you manage all of the things that are doing all the work. And so in Hello, the data plane is users logging in and doing things like that. That's the data plane. And the control plane is how the admin or developer for the app manages their app about how their app works in the data plane. Make sense? Yeah. So for our control plane, we have a no-auth 2 API where someone literally can go through to some other app, and then that app can go and manage the developer's app, right? As opposed to it only being a web interface. And so we did that because that makes it easy for other people to help their customers manage the app at hello. It's kind of, there's some layers of meta in that. So since we had that, I could write an MCP server that somebody could install in a dev environment, and then from the MCP server, give it commands to add hello to my app, and create both a dark and light logo and upload them to hello, right? So you can do that now. The MCP server is out there and available. And this was also the first app that I created using, English as opposed to coding in TypeScript, right? So this is a TypeScript. Is it TypeScript? No, it's JavaScript. So I didn't write any of these functions in here. I would look at them when they were made. And I built this in Cursor. And so, I iterated around. The first version I did, it just wrapped the existing APIs as MCP. And then I used it in an agent. And it's like, well, that sucked. That wasn't a very good experience because I couldn't figure anything out. And so then I iterated again. And I ended up changing how my infrastructure worked. And that didn't work, and so I iterated again. So I went through 4 iterations in 2 or 3 days here to this version, right? So basically every time scrapping what I had and starting over again, to where now I would use it and I would get feedback about how it wasn't working, and then I would ask it how to go and be better at telling an agent how to go and tell it how to go and use my tool, which was kind of a nice little virtuous loop. And so you can see all the tools, right? There's a description of them that the agent can pull, right? And I didn't write any of that. So I pointed it at my API, and then I gave it a bunch of feedback about how to wrap my APIs into a simpler MCP-like interface. So there's a number of levels of questions about MCP, but I used that I did all of that in Cursor typing over here.
How iterative was this process, or was it more like major single prompts that were building big chunks of?
Oh, I was a fucking idiot to begin with, right? I didn't know what I was doing, right? I never, it's go do this, and it did something stupid. It's okay, well, that wasn't right? And so eventually I figured out, how do I give it the right context to do things? And now, the other thing, and so I went back to VS Code because they added some of the functionality, and I hated it because, you have to go and say yes all the time, right? Where with Cursor, after a bit, I just said, forget it, you just go do all the things. I'm not going to tell you yes every time. And, and it would just run for 5 minutes trying things and hacking away. And so over time, I figured out, what to tell it to get what I wanted. And then I thought, oh, if I go and I give it if I told it to summarize everything that I told it, because we had a way of deploying everything that wasn't how it thought it should deploy, and so I'd have to keep telling it things. So, so I told it to go and summarize all the things I told it and put that in a markdown file, and then I told it that every time I would start a new chat to go and look at that, so it would have all the context about how to do all the things. Yeah.
So since you are more experienced with vibe coding to this MCP server, do you have some tips, advices for someone, let's say, you would be starting all of this all over again? Would be
well, let me go to the next level of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
So this was fairly small in scope. And then what's that? No, I don't want. It was the same color. So then I got access to Kiro. Are people familiar with Kiro? It's like that icon over there. This is the AWS, it's built on VS Code as well. But they have an idea of vibe coding and building specs. And so when you start with them, they go, and here's a bunch of different sets of specs that I wrote as I added other things. And so it'll start off writing, you go and you tell it what you want to do, and then it creates a requirements document. And these are sort of like user stories type things that, that people are fairly familiar with. And so you can read through those, and it's like, okay, well, that isn't really what I want. You can edit it, or you can tell it to change it. And so you iterate working through to get the requirements, what you want them to be. And then it takes those requirements and it creates a design document about how that thing's going to work. And you look at that and it'll do dumb things, and you adjust the design of what you want to do. And over time, I realized more and more that, if there was some data models or something like that, that you wanted to get that into the design document. Otherwise, it would just make up things and not really understand it. And then from the design document, then it goes and it makes up a bunch of tasks about how to do what's in the design document. And then you go and you tell it to do a task, and it'll only do one task at a time. But then the context is the task with the requirements and the design, and then the rest of the documents there. And so, a larger, more complex thing, you break it down into parts that it can work on and do. And, often I would look at the tasks, and it would have, oh, and now I'm going to do testing at the end. And I would say, no, I want you to go test each thing along the way. And so, over time you work on adjusting that. Anybody have questions on this? Or?
So what we are doing here is basically the same process that you would do without the AI assistant.
Well, that you should do, right? Like, I was never good at doing all of that. And so it drives a more structure. In a larger team, people would go through and do all these things, right? In Amazon and Microsoft, you're building software. Everyone sort of creates all these documents, right? And all of that would be like 2, 3, 4 weeks of work. And then it's like, okay, now we'll go and do little sprints to do each one of those, right? And it's like, okay, well, I can be done the requirements in a couple hours, and then I can have the design done in a couple hours, and then the task done in an hour. And then the thing runs around and goes and does them. And I can go and say, do them all, and it does each one by itself, and sometimes it gets confused and lost, right? But, this one repo, I've probably got a week of work in it, but I didn't really understand how I wanted my data model to be, and so, it's a fairly complicated system I'm building here. And it's in Go, which I don't know. Right, so I can look at the Go code and I can figure out what it's doing, but I wouldn't be able to type Go code at all. And the reason I picked Go is, you write a Go file and a Go test, and so that the process is often there's a test right away for that unit test to make sure it does what it wants to do. And so it's a lot harder to have things that will fail at runtime with Go.
It's amazing. You will be able to build this alone. Are you alone in this MCP server project?
Am I?
You built it alone? Are you alone?
This thing? Oh, yeah.
1 week.
Well, this doesn't work yet, but as I built it, I realized that I wanted it to do more things than I needed it to do, and I realized there are some things that I needed to do that I kind of hacked into it later. And so, because there's not a huge investment, I'm going to kind of put that in a little archive directory and start over again with some of the stuff I have here, right? Where if I'd have been writing, spent 5 months writing this, it's like, no way am I going to toss it away, right?
Just keep building on it.
Right. And so it enables you to sort of, like you were saying, doing a proof of concept on you would think of an app with the UX and stuff like that. I'm essentially figuring out how my data model might work and the flows might work between, syncing and things. And I realized, I got to go and address rate limiting because the APIs I'm calling will get rate limited. So how do I rate limit each thing, have that built in? So that was Kiro. which I consider somewhat buggy because it gets confused at times on what's happening in the console. It's just like, I don't know. And there's a new thing that just came out from Microsoft, which I don't know. It has a similar approach. It's called Spec Kit. And so you can install it in your project, and then you tell it whether you're using VS Code or Claude or Gemini. And it sort of builds a similar kind of idea of, you know, a spec and a plan and tasks around what to do. It's not the same as Kiro, but it sort of has that same idea of breaking a large problem down. They have some ideas of the constitution you have for how everything should work, right? They're trying to make it that, like, tell the AI, if you don't know how to do something, ask me, which I'm like, you know, why wouldn't it do that anyway? But, and I started using this with GPT 4.1, which might have been a mistake. And so I told it to build this thing in Go, and then it was really dumb about how it did it because it put all of the source Go files in one directory and all the tests in another directory, which is not how you write Go. But it might be because I used GPT 4.1, which isn't smart about that. So I don't know. So still rapidly evolving. I mean, that functionality in Kiro was one of the reasons why I've been using that. They had a billing bug in their code in August, and they started like, they weren't counting how many things were happening correctly, and so they were heavily overbilling everybody. And then they said, oh, that was bad. And then they says, okay, we're going to give everybody their money back, and no one's going to have to pay anything until September. And then clearly they didn't, that wasn't going to meet the schedule, and so he says, nobody has to pay until mid-September. So I've been using Kiro a bunch because it's like no cost to go and make the robot do a whole bunch of stuff.
To try everything
Yeah.
that you can. It's wonderful.
But this has been a big shift in my own, you know, now it's like, okay, I don't know Go, I can write, you know, stuff in Go that I know is going to be better quality than writing it in TypeScript that I can ship into production.
Yeah, it makes sense. For example, for me, I usually code in Python, and the main use cases that I give to like those AI systems are mainly to exchange ideas. Maybe something that I think might be a solution, but I want to have some more opinions. And when you're at the office, you can always ask your peers. But for example, if it's 3 a.m. and I'm alone at home working, AI is always there, so it's good to exchange ideas. And also, for example, Python has some flaws, and sometimes we want to do things in other languages, for example, Rust or C#. And it's very good at translating the code that I'm building in Python into other languages, which basically is where you're doing it, but instead you're doing it in English to Go.
Other questions? Don't be shy.
I can ask you, what can you tell me about a team? I see that you work mostly alone, as I heard. But what about your teams or with whom you make this project? How it's communicative, how it works in your workflow?
Right. So there's two other people in the team, right? And you know, one of them is a more junior guy that did all of the front end for our product, right? So I've been, you know, ramping him up on how he uses agents for all of his work. And so at times, like, I'll be going through something and I'll tell him, it's like, okay, if I'm giving you this level of detail, I could just type it out and have an agent do it. So let's figure out something where you're adding value where I couldn't have an agent do that. And so we've been ramping up on that so that, his productivity goes up as well. And there's like a huge number of things where you're still talking about how all the things work, what's going to be the right user experience, right? There's a large number of decisions that aren't really code decisions, that are product decisions, or how do we prioritize things, right? So we're doing a migration of some of our identifiers in our system, right? And so he's been using an agent to go help him figure that out, which he would never have been able to do a year ago, right? Like, he's a front-end engineer, and now he's writing code that's going to like rip through our production database and make changes, right? So he's much more powerful now than he was previously, But I think that many software companies, there's a smaller team. You have a smaller team, you don't have as many communication breakdowns between everybody, and everybody's able to move much faster. But I think people that are, like when I worked at Amazon, most of the engineers I work with, like I knew they would never become a principal engineer, right? They just never, they weren't passionate enough about it, and like it was kind of a job. And I think a lot of those people, like unless they up-level their skills, they don't really have a role long-term doing what they were doing.
Regarding that, how do you think like it's the way for you to upskill? If you're not technical, for instance, if you're a designer, if you're a business grad, you just got out of college and you're joining a startup, how can you wrap up that skills without going to have a technical degree? For instance, because 2 weeks ago, Quintas was explaining the principles of Python to me, and I was like, wow, that is interesting, but I don't think I can like grasp it like tomorrow, right? Or even like I really have to dedicate myself to it. What would you think it's like the first steps that you can do to somebody that is a non-technical to grasp a good basis, or to have the basics?
I mean, when I was at Active State, right, we were, part of what we want to do is like, how do we, I view that knowing how computers work should be something that's taught in school the same as math and English, right? Mm. It's such a huge part of how things happen in the world that, it's like you should know how a computer works. And so fortunately, you can go and talk to an agent. You won't be embarrassed when asking a bunch of questions, and it's not going to be irritated with you. So I would go and use it to go and learn the high-level concepts and how software works, right? But you don't now need to learn the syntax anymore, right? Like, you need to be able to look at it and understand what it does, but you don't have to be able to write it. And that, like, I can look at the Go code and know what it does, but I don't know Go syntax at all, right? And I don't need to, right? And I hate writing shell scripts, and like I was doing that 6-7 months ago. I would just write a big shell script, and it's like, well, that's way better than I would ever do it. Run it, and away it goes, yeah. Right? But you have to have a concept of what it is, right? Like you can't cook meals unless you have an idea that, like, when you heat things up, stuff changes, right? Like, yeah. Right? Like, if all you ever had was food put in front of you, and you never knew what happened in the kitchen, right? Well, that's going to be a problem. But if you get into the kitchen, you don't have to be, you don't need to know deep stuff and the theory in cooking to be able to go and follow a recipe and make something, right? But you do have to understand, like, putting a pot on something hot makes the water boil and stuff happens, right? Like, those are, basics you need to know about cooking. I don't know if that analogy works. I'm just making that up right now, but.
It can.
So I'm thinking, like, your first part of the question, like, if you're not technical, you should know, I'd say, know a little bit. Doesn't mean you have to know how to code, right? That's a huge plus. You don't have to know how to code to create stuff. but you need to understand how computers work in some way to be able to do things. And then the advantage of vibe coding is like, okay, now you can go and create software that helps you if you have an idea around how you want to be more productive about doing something, right? Which is different than, oh, I'm going to go and create a business selling an app, right? I don't think that's a path to success, right? So, just like you were saying, like, there's a bunch of stuff around improving go-to-market. You have an idea around some data that you would like to go and work with, right? Well, now you're not limited of having to have somebody else code that for you, right? You could vibe coding, have something that does it and see, oh, that doesn't really do anything, or it does, right? But the time it takes you to do that is low, right? So you can experiment a whole bunch about things that before you couldn't experiment about because it required some software to do something.
Yeah. What sometimes happens is like when I do a mistake, I sometimes don't know how to find it and how to fix it. And I don't want to bother them, like, oh, how can I fix this, or how can I, and it's like a bunch of code that I didn't generate, that I just,
No, I got a bunch of code I didn't generate
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I'm like, it's like it's not doing the right thing, right?
But you can understand it in a way that maybe I can't.
I'm not
Maybe
even
no,
looking,
that I
the
can't.
only thing I'm looking at in the Go code is really the data structures,
Okay.
right? Because I'm like, okay, well, if you don't, that's not what I want. I want, like, this is what the data model needs to look like. And like all the other stuff, I'm kind of like, I might glance over it, but I didn't look at 80% of the code made. But you're right, there's a thing in like when it doesn't work, right? It's understanding enough about how things are happening that you can tell it what's supposed to happen, and then it can kind of like figure it out. But you need to be able to provide enough context about what you're doing for that to work. That's helpful. Other questions?
That's it.
Okay.
Well, Dick, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And
As promised, highly opinionated. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Thank you for also teaching us a bit about how you are vibe coding this MCV server, which is basically a real thing that you can do, and also how to structure it, for example, with Cairo. Very interesting approach. Thank you.
well, now guys, stay for we have some pizzas and some juices. So mingle, and thank you so much for coming. Yeah, I would like to also talk a bit about our sponsors, of course. If you want to chat a bit about Hello and what you do over there.
If you're building an app, Hello is the fastest, easiest way to add identity to your app, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are on a mission to debureaucratize and help you be more efficient in your business. We're creating Commutal, where you can create, manage, and operate companies autonomously here in Portugal.
Thank you.
We also want to talk about Octagon Labs, and they're giving some vibe coding lessons. Philippe?
Here. Yeah, Octagon Labs here, we provide services on what we call practical AI, which is helping organizations, individuals use AI on practical ways, whether it is using, enabling people to better use the tools that already exist, and help teams also build faster using the tools that already exist, not
Well, thanks for having me. Why the name Octagon Labs?
Octagon is roundabout in Budapest. Maybe so. My co-founder. So this is more of a private name, but it sounds very well, very good for us. I met my co-founder back in university almost 20 years ago. We're both software engineers. He took a more technical path as the CDO. I took a more business and development path. And we kept friends for years. About 3 years and a half ago, we decided to start the company. And the reality is when we really got to start mingling together is when we lived together in Budapest because we did exchange there. And we were living on an apartment just by Octagon, the roundabout. It's kind of the Marquês de Pombal of Budapest. And it's a roundabout with an octagonal shape. It's very interesting, and so it's a way for us to memorize those moments. But it also is a way to kind of explain the crossroads of where we want to live.
Right. So nothing to do with the Ultimate Fighting Club, Enter the Octagon. Because that was the first thing that came to mind for me, and so I was wondering.
Although sometimes it is a fighting place, but that's part of being a founder also. Starting a company.
Good. Well,
Yeah, it's kind of. Yeah.
Well, that's all, folks. Thank you.
so who's